Okay, tonight is November 15th, 2021. This is a meeting of the local budget committee. And tonight we're going to be talking about the fire and rescue department, the emergency management, public safety building, and that'll take care of our evening. Steve, can you lead us in the pledge of allegiance to the flag?
I sure can. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we've got Chief Zoddy here with us this evening. Chief, congratulations on your promotion, appointment.
Thank you.
Well deserving. And Casey, do you have anything you want to talk to us about before we get started?
No, I think we'll just do it as we're going along in the departments, unless you wanted to talk about the chief's rate of pay, but I think there was a memo from the town manager, the first document
Okay.
in the fire section.
Yeah, if we have any questions, I'm sure the board can ask them to you if any questions about the memo or anything. So let's, I guess the first thing we'll jump into is the ambulance services.
Yeah, so we're in section 8, page 7, ambulance services, department 42150. This is up 3.4%, which is technically up 3% due to the cap. It's 3%, or the annualized change of the New England CPI. So the CPI was more than 3, so it's going up 3% in '22.
And that's what the contract's based on?
Yes, and I believe that's the last year of the contract. I think they'll be negotiating it for the following year.
Okay. Any questions for anyone in the ambulance services? Okay, seeing them, we'll move on to the
Page 8, fire and rescue, department 42200.
start off with the 100 series. Chief, do you anticipate filling your position at some point?
I have made some adjustments, proposed adjustments to the job description, and it's been forwarded to the town manager, who's on vacation until at least tomorrow.
Yep.
I'm hoping to meet with him either sometime this week or next week, and if he approves the changes, we hope to post that very shortly thereafter. So the short answer, yes, we hope to fill that right off.
So is that the money that you're requesting for the deputy chief, fire chief, is that starting from January 1st? Or
In this, yes.
in the budget? Okay. Anyone have any questions about the 100 series?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yep.
I'm looking at the letter from the town manager to the Board of Selectmen, and I'm just looking at pay scales, or I'm assuming pay scales as far as call firefighter and so on and so forth, and number of years of service. And do we reward people for good performance, or do we only take into consideration years of performance?
I'm trying to think the best way to answer that. We do not currently evaluate the call members similar to what we do with full-time staff in terms of employee evaluations and so forth. It is something that I've kind of kicked around that I may want to implement. Essentially, the way we handle it is if we start to see a lack of attendance or something along those lines, each of our call members is assigned to one of the groups with a full-time lieutenant and so forth. And generally, through the chain of command, we will, try to find, is there something going on we can help you with? Are you just having a bad month or two? Or, try to get a sense of what might be going on in their lives. If it's, fixable or a short-term thing. We understand people have busy lives, and we may not see them for a month or two, but things calm down and we start to see activity again. In the long term, if we are seeing minimal to no activity, whether it's call response or training, they'll generally get a a sit-down meeting with me, or at the time, the deputy, to encourage them to improve. And occasionally, we have somebody who just says, my life situation has changed, and they'll resign. I have kicked around, like I said, the idea of actually implementing a performance appraisal type of thing, similar to what we do with the full-time staff.
Okay.
But we typically, after I think it's every 5 years of service, they get a bit of an increment. And also certain benchmarks in certification will result in, for example, another 25 cents an hour or something like that.
Thanks.
John, I have a question on part-time wages. It's going up about over 11%. Is there a reason for that? Or what is the cause of this?
Half year of the,
No, this is part-time wage.
part-time.
That is, that line is the pay for the call members of the department.
Yes,
It's gone up in part based on the earlier question with some members who have achieved certain seniority. Also, we had a number of members achieve a higher level of certification, which again, we compensate them for to a degree. And we're also moving forward hoping to add some part-time firefighters to the roster, and we need to be able to budget for them.
that would be taking people from call to part-timers?
No, the same thing. Same people. Call part-time, we use it interchangeably.
Because overall, your bottom line on this 100 series is up 7%, which is pretty high.
I think you're gonna find that part of that is, now that we filled the chief's position, number one. Number two, again, some of that is the part-time wages where we've budgeted for a bit of an increase due to hopefully more members and some increased level of certification in the existing members.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
Chief, in your proposal, you're looking for 3 new people within the next, 3 years?
the intent would be, you have to add one a year for 3 years.
It's gonna be a pretty expensive proposition for the folks from town. I would say probably each position will be over with benefits, probably, what, 100,000, 120,000, somewhere in there?
With benefits, if it's reasonable, yeah.
Do you have anything other than what the National Fire Service recommends? Do you have any activity that you reported, increased activity or anything?
In the backup, there's a series of memos from the summer that I understand have been provided to you that provide some of the justification. And in meeting with Matt over the weekend, we talked about some other things. I could add a little bit to I only made 12 of these. I think there's another bit of background for your review and consideration is, as you may be aware, that every approximately 10 years or so, the town is subject to review from ISO, the Insurance Services Office, and they develop a scoring system by which they score our responses, our level of training, our number of people, the water system, basically a number of things that you can associate with fire protection. The most recent one for the town was 2018, and after some discussion, what you're seeing in front of you is the page of that summary report that addresses staffing. Long story short, out of a possible 15 points of credit, we score 4.73. So again, that's one of the issues we hope to address by this going forward. We hope to increase that. I can't sit here and tell you that all of a sudden everybody's insurance rate's going to drop, but it is one of the factors that's used when they set your rates for commercial and residential insurance. And I just tried to put it out there for you. That's the whole section, you know, please at some point read it over and draw your own conclusions.
If we put all these sections together, what do we come up with a score? If we put everything all together, the insurance company bases it on?
Well, again, there's multiple sections, I don't have the whole report with me, but, there's multiple sections, again, for the water supply and things like that. The town is now rated at, what we call a 4-4Y. We're at a level 4 in the quote-unquote compact area of the hydrant district, and what they call a 4Y outside of the hydrant district. Good, not great, far from bad. We've improved a little bit since the previous rating. And if the committee is so inclined, I can email you copies of both the previous one and the current one if it's something you'd like to review. But we did make some degree of improvement, in large part due to improvements that were made with much help from this committee, among others, to the water supply system and improvements in the water distribution and so forth. A lot of the improvement was in the level of the dispatch center and number of call takers and things like that. What we're hoping to do now is move forward with some of the areas that we can improve on in our fire response.
So didn't our score go,
It dropped by 1.
but didn't it go up with the purchase of, or the potential purchase, or the purchase and sale agreement for the new ladder?
I generally wouldn't change, because we had one when we were scored, and we're still going to have one, so it really wouldn't change the score any.
Okay.
It assumes we have it.
With the ISO, when I talked with former Chief Norm, the ISO is one measure of how responsive and how good, it's a rating system, but it's not, my recollection from having conversations with him is it's somewhat important, but it's not, it shouldn't be a driver, is my understanding of it. Yes, we want to be aware of it, and to your point exactly, it's not a, if we increase our score by 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, there is no immediate impact. So I guess my question, having said all that, is, do you, as the new chief, see any kind of deficits in your staffing, given the fact that we've had credible response rates in the past? I mean, do we really need to, I mean, I understand that we want to grow our individual departments, that's a natural tendency, but I also wonder, to John's point, it's a pretty hefty nut when we add 3 new staff at $100,000, and frankly, when it's just acknowledged that $100,000 nut per employee, that's a big nut. You know, to a private company, that's a huge investment of capital. So I'd like to make sure that we look at this carefully. The proposal for 3 new staff members, I'm not in favor of, and I would welcome your response to getting the rest of the ISO to us, as far as like a scoring system.
Happy to.
Yes, sir, Bob.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Chief, how many full-time staff do you have right now?
11 full-time, including myself and the open deputies position, and 9 line firefighters, 3 lieutenants, 6 firefighters.
And how many per shift?
On a perfect day, 3 line personnel per shift, the deputy and myself, Monday through Friday days, generally.
Okay. I just want to touch base on this ISO thing. I actually did a little homework on this. It does drive your insurance rate, Steve. And I would say a 4.73 out of a 15 is probably, I would say it's poor. I would say it's a poor score, just off the top. And this ISO is not just used here, it's used throughout the country. So I know my homeowner's insurance has gone up $300 over the last 14 years. And I'm sure that's part of the driving force to that. I think if you, I'm in support of them adding firefighters. If you look around Wolfeboro and you go to the other communities, it's a pretty lean fire department. We have an extremely lean fire department. You don't have a whole lot of, you don't have a ton of equipment. There's not a ton of apparatus in this town. If you don't believe me, go look at the station. And we don't have a ton of firefighters. I think they show it. And I know that this conversation's been had before. We have mutual aid, that's what it's for. Mutual aid can fail. It has before, and it will again. And these young men and women are on their own for the first 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, depending on what's going on around us. And that's the difference between life and death. So if we're counting $100,000 compared to someone's life, I think we're taking the short end of that the wrong way. So I'll leave it at that.
Right.
Just kind of tying in with that, Chief, I was gonna say, from a practical standpoint, are you able to articulate what the town would gain or what the taxpayers would gain by adding these positions?
Well, I think the town overall, obviously, it's an expensive proposition, there's no getting around it. I think the town overall and the department, number one, it allows us that much more margin of safety operating at an incident. And I go into it in some of the memos that I believe you have in your backup material. We have a number, as you can imagine, we have a number of tasks that have to be performed at an incident. Many of which we have to do consecutively because we have 2, maybe 3 people, and you can only do one thing at a time, and you put together a plan and try to execute it. In the interest of efficiency and of safety, if we can start to be able to do some of those tasks concurrently rather than consecutively, we speed up the whole operation, hopefully mitigate the incident sooner, and at less risk to our personnel. It is not unusual, as recently as yesterday, for us to respond. We were blessed with 3 people on duty yesterday, on Sunday. 2 responded to a medical incident, CPR in progress. It was a save, not due solely to us, but to some degree. But at the same time, a fire alarm at the Wolfeboro Inn, which we at that point had to respond to with 1 person. It turned out to be a faulty detector. It wasn't a crisis. But as you can imagine, being that staff member walking into a facility the size of the inn, not overly crowded yesterday, but they had guests and they were functioning. We were quickly able to establish that it was a faulty detector. We have, and I'm having a hard time putting together numbers because of our relatively new reporting system on the number of concurrent calls we have. When we were using our previous system, it was a fairly easy report, and we average 11 to 12% of our calls. There's more than 1 call going on at the same time. That's the kind of thing we want to start to address. Also, we touch on our overtime costs as our members, our full-time members, mature in their careers and earn accrued leave as a benefit, and we encourage them to take it for mental health reasons, for physical health reasons, all the reasons we work. And at the same time, the town's policy is encouraging them to use it because you can only carry a certain amount, but we still have to cover the shifts. And one of the things we're trying to accomplish with this is to have to fill fewer shifts on overtime and still maintain a minimum number of people on duty available to respond.
John, I've done the numbers.
Hold on
and
just a second.
Excuse me.
Go ahead, John.
I think this is a very difficult thing to pin down exactly how many people you need and more or less. I think probably it's impossible to sign so many, but I think probably the easiest way for us to see something is on that, what, an ISO or see that report.
Sure.
And that way we have an outside agency to look at. So I'd like to see.
If it's all right with the chair, I'll email it to you tomorrow and you can distribute it.
If you could send it to Leanne, she'll get
Sure,
it there for
okay.
you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Since 2019, over 3 years, I just did some quick numbers, and not counting clerical, they've increased their labor costs by about 3.98% a year since 2019. I don't think that's all that bad. With the way the market has been, inflation, trying to find employees, having to give raises and pay increases and inflation and everything, I think they're doing a good job.
Does that also include overtime?
Yes,
Total cost?
yes, total cost. I just did it.
If I may, on that point, you may remember not too many years ago, we had a fair amount of turnover in the full-time staff, and with a lot of help from you folks and the Board of Selectmen and the voters, we've been able to make the line personnel salaries competitive with departments around us, which I think I could sit here and tell you I feel that it is today. That I think accounts for some of that number as well. And we also have, we kind of have a dichotomy. We have a number of staff who've been around for a long time, such as myself. And we have a number of fairly young personnel, and there's not a lot in between, to be honest with you. So that said, as they gain seniority, obviously, cost of living adjustments and so forth. So we understand that, we're a labor-intensive department and it's not inexpensive.
With all that you've done, getting people up to, because I heard it years ago that we were one of the lowest paid fire departments around.
It's true.
And with all we've done to get them up, to get more help, to make it so that the Seabird didn't burn down, and other things, they're only doing it about 3.98% a year total labor costs, which is not that bad. And everybody, when their house is on fire, they want firemen
Go
there.
ahead, John.
They don't care what the money.
The budget for 2021 was, and the total of the 100 series was $877,612. In 22, it is $938,967, which comes out to be 6.99%.
I'm going back to 2019. I'm not accounting for just 1 year. I'm looking at a 3-year average over the 3 years, because 2020 and 2021 have been crazy years, and everything has been out of whack. To judge something this year based on just last year is not doing justice to what has happened in the country in the last 2 years.
Well, I'm only saying what the 2 years show, that's all.
Yeah.
I apologize, they normally keep a 5-year average on actual.
Yep.
I don't have it.
I can attest to that. He does keep 5 years.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Is there any grant money out there that's been looked for?
There is a grant that covers, let me back up. It's called it's referred to as a SAFER grant, staffing, something, anyway. It's a federal grant. I pursued that and frankly made the decision to proceed in this manner for a number of reasons. One, the grant, if we're successful, covers base salary. It doesn't cover holiday pay, it doesn't cover overtime, doesn't cover protective clothing, doesn't cover any other equipment. It's literally that hourly rate base salary, period. And I felt that in the end, we end up almost in the same place if we phase in one employee over the 3 years. What would happen was that grant would cover that base salary for 3 years, and then boom, we own them lock, stock, and barrel. So in the interest of, small bites at the apple, I thought we'd proceed by starting a person halfway through the year with a budget that includes their equipment, their uniforms, their overtime, their holidays, everything else. And move forward that way, and hopefully, if we're successful, add one a year for 3 years. Number two, in an organization our size, and I'll let you all think back to your professional lives and so forth. Onboarding 3 brand new people off the street at one time is very, very difficult, as you can imagine. That would take a gargantuan effort on the part of every member of the department to pull that off. We have no guarantees that these 3 people would be local. They may be coming from a distance. We certainly encourage our call members to work up to be qualified to work full-time, and we have a few who have reached that level. But we also, when we look at the big picture and how much of a challenge it would be to onboard 3 people relatively all at once, I felt it was easier all the way around to just proceed at one a year rather than trying to do it in one fell swoop.
So the grant requires that you bring on 3 people? or-
No, because that's what we're proposing to do.
But you don't
If we were gonna
have
go
a grant.
through the effort of writing the grant, I would expect we'd wanna write one grant for 3 people rather than trying to do it 3 times and may or may not be successful after the first one.
Matt?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement with everything Bob said. I am in agreement with it. The chief and I talked about this for well over an hour this weekend. And I asked a lot of questions about call volumes, which have increased. The size of the department has not increased in over 15 years.
2003 was the last time we had a
2003.
full-time staff.
Overtime has been going up, training requirements have been going up. The professionalism in responding to calls has been going up. Medical responses are increasing. The nature of fires has changed with new building materials. Things have become more dangerous, requiring more training. And response times on site are critical, when there is a fire. Getting there in just minutes, seconds kind of matter because they double in size real quickly. And some of this I learned from the chief, some I've learned from my son who just went through the fire academy. He's now working over in Guilford full-time, he took a job in Guilford. And then I see record number of building permits in town. We're talking about more workforce housing, which 70 units there. There's more activities being brought in the winter. Fat bikes over at Abenaki, you're gonna see issues there, you're gonna see responses there as that builds up. And so on, and things change. I mean, we're going back 17, 18 years before the force is growing. And now we're going into the future and the town is continuing to grow, et cetera. Oh, and there's a lot of responses on the water too, on the lake. So I think it's something we need to look at real seriously. And
A quick question.
Go ahead, John.
The police have a rating based upon the number of responses they make and stuff like that. And now, is there any such a rating like that for the fire department, i.e. the number of responses that you make each year?
Sure. No, I could tell you, we did 1,513 calls last year, and we're on pace to do over 1,500 this year.
Well, but the one in the police, for example, in New Hampshire, in Wolfeboro, it's the green, which is the very lowest rating. Is there any comparison rating like that for different colors, i.e., this 1,500 calls you say, or whatever, is that bad or good compared to overall fire departments?
If I understand the question, and I can't give you an answer based on right now, today. I can tell you the last time we looked at it was, I think the last time the Census Bureau issued some figures which would have put us around 2010. And we did a little comparison, and we fell at the time consistent with the number of calls, was consistent with towns and small cities in the 8,500 to 10,000 population range. If that, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
Well, I'm going to shut up here. Sorry. Thank you.
One more,
Right, Bob?
or maybe two more. I'm leaning towards agreeing with Bob Mulholland and Matt Flash, and I also, in fact, I was gonna ask you if you think about anticipated build-out as part of this. And
Sorry, it's Monday.
that's it. And also, I think maybe a workup on that grant versus no grant might be worth it, because it might be more reasonable for us. And I think this could be done, possibly the fairest way it could be done would be a warrant article that says, yeah, we're going for a grant, and we intend to hire somebody, and if the grant is approved, it will defray the cost of this person's base salary for X amount of time. Let the people decide. That's my feeling. It shouldn't, well, the selectmen could make a decision, with our recommendation or not, but, so that's my feeling on it.
Yes, sir.
Just one thing, I went down to the bottom of the fire and rescue total, the whole budget is going up by 2%. I think we're talking about, we're tilting at windmills.
It'll kick up more because that position's only getting paid for 5 months, so it's gonna go up a little bit more, from once it gets into January.
Okay, well, but it's
Oh, yeah.
relatively
Yeah.
insignificant, the total increase in the budget, and that includes his proposed addition. I am in favor of this whole addition business, because the effect on the overall budget doesn't appear to be all that great.
Thank you, Linda.
Yes, Tom, when it came before the Board of Selectmen, we asked you whether there were some areas that you would cut if you got that position. Will you explain to the budget committee what you did to bring the rest of the budget down for us?
We went back and looked and frankly redid some calculations, particularly on overtime and stop me if I go out too far into the weeds, but the issue we're trying to resolve in part are what we call our Kelly days, and you may have heard that reference in the past. That is based on our work schedule, that is a scheduled day off when one of the 3 firefighters on duty on a given day is on a Kelly day, they're off. So if one of the 2 left is ill, injured, has just to take an accrued leave day to go on vacation with the family or whatever, we have to backfill that position on overtime. So the tentative plan, if we're successful, would be to schedule this new firefighter to work Wednesdays and Fridays, which are 2 of our 3 Kelly days. The idea being, once they're onboarded and up to speed, as shifts open up on those 2 days, we don't have to fill as many of them with overtime. So we were able to reduce the overtime line by about $16,000, I believe, based on that analysis. We also, in our, not to jump ahead, but in our capital outlay, we were able to reduce the requests for some tools by frankly purchasing some of them this year and asking for the balance next year. Obviously, we'll continue to review that as we move forward and hopefully, find deficiencies as we go. But the primary thing that we're dealing with is filling shifts primarily on those Kelly days. Now, we have 3 Kelly days, Thursday being the 3rd. Obviously, we don't want somebody working a scheduled shift of 48 hours in a row if we can at all avoid it. So that's where the Wednesday, Friday came from. That said, bigger picture moving forward, if we are successful in 3 years, in adding one member to each of the 3 shifts, that gives us the ability to consider changes to the work schedule, to drop to a 42-hour work week from a 48-hour work week. And
Without the Kelly days or with the Kelly days?
there would be no Kelly days anymore. They go away. And that is one of the big advantages to looking at that going forward. That would allow us, frankly, 12 members divided by 4 shift keeps us with 3 on duty, which is our long-term goal.
Being part of the, now that they've joined the other union, I can't, AFCME, whatever it is.
Actually,
Is that Kelly Day part of the contract? Is that part of the contract?
I believe the work schedule is still a management right
Still
as
management.
far as that goes.
Okay.
I mean, they are still negotiating their first part of this.
Okay. Any other questions for the
Yeah,
chief?
just a clarification, so the budget as proposed, you've already reduced the overtime
Correct.
in anticipation of the additional
Correct.
person? Okay.
Correct.
So if the additional person is not approved, you would need to build in some,
We
build back
would,
some
we,
overtime?
it would be an issue.
Okay,
You know, if you, I believe you have the actuals as of early October. I'm not gonna mislead you. We are overspent in overtime right now. It is what it is. I will say that, part of this has, and I don't wanna make it a scapegoat, but part of this is the whole COVID situation. We have had, number one, our members offer to work at some of the clinics around the state. That is on overtime, and then we are reimbursed by the state for that cost. You see the expense, the revenue is in another part of the budget. So some of that overtime has been reimbursed. Some of it is due to, we had 3 positives in the department, literally at the same time. I bought an air mattress because I thought I was gonna be living in my office for a couple of days. We worked through it, but we had a number of our staff step up and work a lot of hours to make up for that. Not only were those folks out, and all thankfully were minor cases and were able to return to work, we also have had issues with family members being exposed and having to quarantine, and then they can't come to work. So as much as that does play into it, it's still out there, obviously a little less so perhaps, now that, you know, the vaccinations are out and we know more about the virus and who needs to quarantine and who doesn't and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you, chief. If this should go through, we can't make a commitment to all 3.
Understood.
3 years, it's just be for this year, then you come back for the year after that, okay? Anything else? One other thing, I hope I know the police departments, when they hire somebody, they train them, send them to the academy and all that other stuff, they have a certain period of time they have to work for the department. Is that something you'll consider for your future hire?
We do not have that today, but recent events have prompted that discussion on how we might
Okay.
word something like that.
Great, thank you. Okay, 200 series? Series. The 430 vehicle maintenance. Isn't most of your stuff fairly new? That I see it's gone up quite a bit. Well, you've only used 16,486 so far this year, and you're up to 40,000. 36,175. Anyway, we could cut that back a little bit with the new stuff, or is that?
Well, I think we accounted for that going forward. That was one
Okay.
of the adjustments we made. Please understand, you're looking, I believe, at an October 2nd report. Since this was run, we have issued purchase orders for multiple thousands of dollars of vehicle maintenance. It's just, we tend to do the majority of our elective maintenance later in the year because, for example, if in April we blow a transmission and have to put $30,000 into a truck, it's gonna affect how we spend our money going forward. So we tend to hold off on the routine pump testing, pump maintenance, that sort of thing, until generally the August, September timeframe, which also corresponds with the state inspection and that sort of thing.
One correction, the October actuals are through the whole month.
Oh,
That
okay.
would be, I see the two, but that's for 2021.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
And also, if you look on page 10, you will see that the town manager and the board of selectmen did decrease this this account, $8,450 for the brand new ladder, assuming there'll be no vehicle maintenance for that.
The ladder is still expected in approximately September of next year, and we're working on this line, assuming that should any issues arise, it'll be warranted.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Okay, 400. 500.
Excuse me,
Yes, sir.
back to 400, building maintenance.
Okay.
Looking at a fairly substantial increase from last year, 3,900 up to $66,000, 6,000 and change. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. As you're aware, we're having conversations about the future of the public safety building and
Right.
other facilities. So what we have, long story short, I think we're working on the assumption that regardless of how we move forward with that, we're gonna be where we are for several years anyway. So what we tried to do was make sure we accounted for being able to maintain what we have. We were successful earlier this year in disposing of the old municipal fire alarm equipment, which allowed us to open up the old fire alarm room, as we termed it, to create hopefully some workstations in there with some computer terminals and so forth. So particularly our call members can come in and do online training and some stuff like that. Right now, it's a storage room because the equipment that came out of there was sold off and so forth, and we hope to be able to spend a bit of money on it to get it to a level where it's of some function. We're able to pressure wash the building this fall, and that uncovered some paint issues with the CMU, the cement blocks on the apparatus bay area, which we want to be able to, long story short, the work on the ladder bay door that we just did, we've held off on the painting to be able to do a slightly larger project, hopefully in the spring, that incorporates some touch-up to the rest of the cement work and so forth to hopefully hold us for a period of time. We're kind of just working on the assumption, we're gonna be there for a number of years regardless of how we move forward with any building plan.
Thank you.
Question for you on the revenue for some of those sales of equipment. Where does the revenue show up? It doesn't show up here, but does it show up somewhere?
Yes, in the revenues, it would be, in that case, it's sale of town property.
Okay, and do we know what that amount is? I mean, that might,
That was a little over $4,000.
so doesn't one negate the other?
No, you are raising and appropriating how much he can spend. It really is irrelevant how much revenue he brings in.
Okay.
It is relevant to the taxpayer because it
Right, I
helps
know,
on their
that's-
tax bill. But how much money he needs to spend is
Right.
still how much money he needs
Okay.
to spend.
And I'll admit, I've had some trouble getting my head around that myself,
Yeah, I mean, I'm
but
just,
I'm
as
getting
a
there.
taxpayer.
Yes,
and
yes,
a
it
budget
is
committee
very
member,
important.
I'm
It
just,
is,
you know, it seems like,
yes, to this budget, it's not relevant because he has to do gross appropriations, which you'll hear me say many times.
okay.
How much money does he need to spend is not relevant to how much he's bringing in to this budget.
Okay.
Some of these miscellaneous revenues are found money, I like to call them.
Yes, it goes into the savings account so that you can do
Right.
bigger projects, which is the undesignated fund balance.
Okay, let's move on.
Yep.
500, 600. $700. $800. professional development, I guess. 20,000.
I'm assuming you're referring to how much has been spent year to date, is that?
Yeah, what the,
Similar to vehicle maintenance, a fair amount of our expense comes due towards the end of the year. We have encumbered a fair amount of money since, in the last few weeks, to cover, for the most part, training classes and things like that. We also have some training equipment that just arrived that is not necessarily reflected in that yet.
okay.
I have a question on 820, professional development. John,
Yes, sir.
go back to the actuals here, 8,000, 8,000, 9,000, 16, well, the budget in one year was 16,000, but actuals looked like it was about 5,700. I'm talking about,
You mean year to date?
Yes.
yes,
Again, that's as of what, the end of October. We have spent a fair amount from that line since then.
What's a fair amount? What is the exact, what have you spent so far?
Probably
Like a round figure,
3,000 to
14,000,
4,000 out
13,000?
of that line, I believe. Which would put that at,
It's at 6. They're seeing 6 if you say you spent 3 or 4 more.
yeah,
It's
no,
about
we've-
10.
yeah, we're probably at 10,000 for the year right now.
And so you may end up around 16 altogether?
It's gonna be close.
So I guess my question, and John's question too, maybe, do we need to go up to 20,000? I mean, it appears from past years that we've budgeted enough, and I don't hear anything that justifies a roughly $4,000 increase, a 24% increase in line 820. So I kind of agree with John on that regard.
I want to point out, and I've said this before, I fully support training. I did it when I was in the service, to make sure that people got trained. But I've noticed over the years that this is a very soft and underspent line, and it bothers me, we just throw it out. 8,000 spent, 8,700, I mean, was spent in 2020. You gotta be very careful with this 2021 to date, I understand that. But those years look like about 8,200 a year we spent those first 3 years that I talked about. And now we're going to go up this much more. I really am concerned.
May I point your attention to page 13? The chief has outlined all the classes and training that he plans on doing, and the town manager did decrease his original request by $6,405. So these are all the items that the chief requested. His original request was for $26,000. Town manager brought it down to 20.
Well,
I'm just
I
showing you
appreciate that.
some details.
But I said my piece here, I'm concerned.
Yep.
Fair enough. I would point out too that some of those numbers include, if we're successful in bringing on some additional call firefighters, the days of bringing people on board who already have some level of certification are kind of few and far between. So if we're successful in hiring call staff who are committed, they're generally starting from scratch, and this is where we pay for their firefighter 1 and 2 certifications and their EMT certifications and that sort of thing.
John, is it improper at this time to say we'd like to look at this later on?
Well, I was gonna make a motion to drop it down to 16,000.
Make one?
I was gonna make a motion to drop it down to 16,000.
I'll shut it then.
Do you want to second it or
I'll
someone?
second it.
Okay. Okay, any discussion?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
looking at the detail, line 820, and going down to the new hire part that you talked about in the detail, new hire FF1, new hire FF2, new members EMT, is that a function, or is that a result of your proposed new hire program?
No. To
Is
be
any-
eligible
is-
to
is
be
any-
hired,
Is any of that?
some of the 820 line is, not necessarily where you see new hire FF1, FF2. To be eligible to be hired full-time in New Hampshire, you're already a firefighter too.
Right.
Most people on the list are also already an EMT.
Okay.
We may, moving forward, want to, if they have interest as well, send them to the AMT class, which is the next level of EMT. The new hire refers to new call members, because they may literally be coming in cold off the street.
Okay.
That's where that phraseology comes from. And we were actually able to drop that a little bit, because I'll defer to Representative McDonald, the state somehow managed to help offset the cost of firefighter training, and the state was able to drop the fees for the certified classes substantially. So we were able to reflect that. They used to be in the $500 to $600 a piece range. They're down to $135, and that's a steal.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, John, was your motion $16,090, the
I
same
just
as
did 16,000.
16,000?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you work with that, chief? Can you work with 16,000?
I mean, we'll have to, but, you know.
No,
No, I mean, we justified, I
nobody's
think,
alive.
what we asked for, but if the board sees fit to reduce that, we'll live.
Go ahead, Brian.
What, the town manager reduced it to 6405, and what did that cut out of it? You know,
My recollection is he did not identify.
Yeah, I
it.
don't believe he
left
cut
it
anything
to the
specific,
chief.
he just kinda gave it a haircut, if you will.
that's an unusual number.
He just brought it down to the 20,000.
Yeah, I think that,
Oh.
yeah, it just from what we proposed to an even 20.
Okay, but within that breakdown, you don't know what got trimmed down then?
He did not
Yeah, I
identify,
don't-
he left it up to the discretion of the chief.
I mean, I haven't added that column up, but I assume that was that column add up to.
26,405, I
Right.
guess, that's correct. Kinda like the ladder, he identified taking money out of the ladder, so I zeroed the ladder out. This one he did not identify.
Okay, so all those requests are still in there then, okay.
And part of that too is, I don't wanna get hung up in semantics going forward. If some member seeks and we find value in a certain certification class that would have value to the town, but not necessarily listed in here, we wanna be able to do that, obviously within the bottom line of that line. But sometimes we can't always anticipate what comes along and might serve a purpose for the town.
John?
Yes, sir.
Chief, based on your conversation, it sounds to me like EMT training is mandatory for firefighters?
For full-time staff, the EMT basic is mandatory.
Okay, so
For our
that's,
call members, we allow them to kind of pick a track, whether they wanna be on the quote fire side or the medical side, and generally speaking, they tend to wanna do both.
okay, so, and then the AEMT, which is the ambulance,
It was advanced EMT.
that's optional, it's based on.
We
your
don't
economy.
require it.
Okay.
And this hasn't really come up, but there has been some discussion in the future of whether the town would retain ambulance transport. That would most likely be the minimum level we would wanna see, at least with one person on each shift.
So the amount of money you have here, you have 3 members taking the EMT course. Am I reading this correct? This is, the quantity is that number 3 next to the 1,600
Correct.
quantity?
That allows
That's
us, if we have
three
three
people.
member, or three new call hires who
Okay.
wanna pursue the EMT side first, or
So-
it's available.
So you're looking at 1 right now, coming in July, right? So that person. will
No,
have
that
to-
person will most likely be certified,
Okay.
but we do have that possibility. The bottom line is if we're successful in hiring from within, and there's a reasonable chance we can do that, and they'll meet all the requirements, they're already gonna be certified.
Okay.
As an administrator, if I have a choice between two relatively similar candidates, one has already completed the certification and one hasn't, we're probably gonna take the person whose learning curve is a little shorter.
Yeah, I'm just trying to develop.
no, understood.
We're talking about bringing it down another 4,000 now, and I was wondering if that's the line where, that 4,000 could come from by itself. But, you know, the gentleman, everybody who brought the issue up are correct. And you think you might top out at about 10,000 this year after, topping out under 10,000 for the 3 prior years. That's what gives us cause to question the 20,000 number, obviously. So, I
Okay.
thought, yeah.
Any more discussion? We all set? Okay, this is gonna be a roll call vote, and the motion is to, reduce line 820 to $16,000. Leanne?
Bob Tupper,
Yes.
John Burt,
Yes,
Brian Black,
Yes.
Bob Mulholland,
No.
Steve Johnson,
Yes.
Bob Bowman,
No.
and Matt Pledge.
No.
So, we have 1, 2, 3 no's.
And how about me?
Oh, yeah, sorry. John McDonald?
Yes.
Okay, so it's 5 to 3.
Motion carries.
So sorry.
Thank you, Leanne.
Anytime.
Okay, anything else on, the heavy series? Or any series?
Next one, page 17, Emergency Management Department 42900.
Okay, 100 series. 200. 600. 700. 800. That's in on emergency management. Any other questions?
Page 19, Public Safety Building, Department 42901.
Okay, 400 series.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Building maintenance. We talked about building maintenance in the last piece. Is this also part of, or is this the front building?
Most, this, in the public safety building, generally is the public safety building. Most of the building maintenance in the previous budget was for the substation,
what?
for the substation.
Okay.
Because we share this building with the PD, it's a separate budget, and
Okay. Thank you.
How about 440 rentals and leases? Can you question what that's for? Is that for cleaning equipment or something, or,
rentals and leases is the copier,
okay,
or, I believe, 2 copiers, I believe.
okay. 600, 700, anything else on,
Yeah, on the 440s, I mean, so that's rental and maintenance of 2 copiers?
Yes.
Isn't it less expensive to buy a copier and just get a new one every year? I mean, that seems like an inordinate amount of money for a rental. I mean, even though it includes, I'm assuming it includes, if it breaks down, they send a guy over to fix it.
Yeah.
I get how important a copier is, but that just seems like a lot of money for 2 copiers. I mean, has anyone investigated doing something different than that?
I guess I'd have to defer to finance. We have the same copiers as
Yeah.
Town Hall, and I believe it's the same contractor.
I'm gonna say in the 12 months that I've been here, no, I haven't investigated it, but in my past life, I think it is an opportunity to get a lot of bulk, if we can get all the copiers on the same contract.
I mean, you could buy
But they,
10 copiers.
They're also-
but
and then
but
just-
they,
and
but
just
they're more like computers at this point,
Well,
because you
I
scan.
There are
understand
printers as well.
You
No, I
scan-
understand that.
But-
I work with them, so I know what they are.
Right, but I'm just saying, so if you could get rid of some scan and some fax machines and some personal printers, and you can bulk, the copy usage,
Okay,
you can develop economies of scale.
okay.
It has not been looked at in the year I've been here, I don't know what's happened in the past, but they do seem to be on different contracts. So it would be a goal of mine, but it takes a lot to wait for them all to come off, and some go off contract, and then try to get all the copiers in town on one
No,
agreement.
it just was doing my due diligence. That just
Yes.
seems like crazy.
It's also one of my pet peeves.
Okay.
I'd like them all to be on
Well,
one
maybe
contract.
somebody can do something about it.
Talk to the school department, see their cost of copiers.
It doesn't justify it. I mean,
A few years back, we were directed to start going this direction from the individual $100 printers at everybody's workstation.
You know,
And we still have a few of those, and as they break down, we don't replace them. I
Right,
mean,
no,
that's the
I-
bottom line.
I get it. I've been there, so
Fair
I
enough.
know exactly what you're talking about, Tom. And then, yeah, it's just it's a crazy
Okay,
thing.
we all set on public safety building?
We can promise it's a long-term goal, how's that?
I like that one.
Okay, what
I
do we
love
got,
to hear
Chief, for
that.
you for, any capital outlay for you?
Yes, he has a capital outlay on page 13 in the capital outlay section. It is for ladder one tools.
And this is something we were able to reduce from the original request by purchasing some of the tools out of current budget. Essentially, what we're looking at here is a number of, I'll use the phrase cordless tools. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the Jaws of Life and those type of extrication tools. Well, the technology has developed to the point, and I'll admit I was a hard sell until I saw it in operation. Now these things they're still hydraulic tools, but they're not piped to the vehicle anymore. They're literally cordless. A small amount of hydraulic fluid in a reservoir, and they run on a battery similar to your drill driver or Sawzall or whatever you might have. Obviously a little higher voltage and so forth, but we were able to identify a series of tools made by Amcus that not only meets our rescue and extrication needs, but also the same battery platform will serve ventilation fans and things like that. So rather than having 4 different sets of different types of cordless tools, which we run on almost all the vehicles, and 4 different chargers plugged in different compartments, we can have one charger with one style of battery that'll run everything. And that's the direction we felt was appropriate to go. We were able to buy some of it, or order some of it out of this year's budget, and we reduced this request from 48,000 to 35,300.
You don't have any, anything left in this year's budget where you can buy some more stuff, or?
We kind of juggled how much we could buy out of this year's budget. I didn't want to empty the line with, at the time, 2 months left in the year. Because, if something breaks, obviously, we generally need to replace it. I was able to reduce it to this level and leave a little bit of cushion in that line for the unforeseen breakdown.
So we're getting the cutter and the spreader and the windshield toolkit and the scene light, 2 Delta scene lights, is that what we're getting?
Yeah, no, the 4 units that are circled, I believe, is
The ones you pulled out.
the ones we pulled out.
So is this replacing the equipment that you already have that require a cord? Is that?
This is essentially gonna allow us to phase those out. When our next vehicle that's due to be replaced is our engine, the Yeah. The next vehicle due to be replaced a few years from now is engine 4, which still has all that hard piped hydraulics in it. So what we're trying to do is plan for the day when that vehicle ends up being traded in for a new engine, and we can avoid the expense of all that hydraulic piping and so forth. And it's, frankly, it's state of the art now. We can go off into the woods, we can do all kinds of things that you couldn't do with a tether, frankly, before.
Do you know if DeWalt is, their equipment made in the USA, or is it made overseas?
My understanding is most of this is made in the USA. I hesitate to say that with 100-degree certainty, but that was one of the things we were hoping we could say.
John, I have a curiosity question here only. It's not aimed at change any equipment here. How many times have you used the equipment that you have now? I'm just curious.
I don't know if I can give you a hard number, but we probably use it I don't want to say we use every piece all the time, but at least some of it, a couple of times a month. It may not be a full-blown multiple vehicle pileup extrication.
Okay.
Some of it we actually have used it to force a door to get into a building when there's a medical alarm or something like that.
I was just
Yeah,
curious. Thank
no,
you.
it's I can't say it's every day, but it's regularly, I guess.
Yes, thank you.
I hope the batteries last longer than they do in my DeWalt.
They're actually, and my understanding is they're a nominally 60-volt battery, but the technology is where, depending on which device you plug it into, it only draws what that tool needs. Some of them will use the whole 60 volts, some of them will use somewhat less than that, but it's the same battery, the same platform, the same charger.
We're just, Chief, we're facing, inflation and all this other stuff, and is there anything that you can see there that we could put off for a year?
Well, we already put off the boat repair part 2 for a year.
I know.
I've got to be honest with you, I don't see a lot that, my fear with waiting a year for, say, the rest of the tools is as they update the models and stuff, part of our goal is to have these things as identical as possible.
What truck are these gonna go on, the new truck? The one, not the ladder truck, we're getting another one next year, right, another new truck?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah, 24, I believe, is the next one.
Okay. Anything else on capital, Casey, for the department?
And Chief just pointed it out on page 16, he did a request for $54,360 to finish rehabbing boat 1. It was denied, and the fire chief felt that the tools were more important than the rehab of the boat for this year.
So the 54 has been withdrawn.
That's correct.
Right. How are those new motors working out for you?
So far, so good. They're very nice. 3 days to install. We were only out of business for a couple of days.
That's excellent.
And it worked out well so far. They're actually out in the, doing some training tonight.
Oh, nice. A little chilly.
Yeah.
A little warm.
Well, we're getting towards the point, we're kind of watching the weather, and it'll be coming out of the lake within the next few weeks. Typically around the 1st of December is when we end up having to pull it.
Okay. Casey, do we have anything else that we need to go over with the chief?
Nope, I believe that completes your agenda.
I have a question, John.
Yes, go ahead,
for the
sir.
night.
So my question is on the 35, if we don't take any action tonight as far as want to revisiting it or anything else like that, we're approving it.
If you'd like to ask right now to revisit it in the future, we can do that. But just so the chief has some understanding that we're gonna talk about.
Yeah, I would like to, because I'm not comfortable spending that kind of money on tools that, in a tight year, that we already have tools that are operational. I understand the wanting to do it, the battery, I mean, it's definitely the way to go. But yeah, I would like to revisit it.
Okay.
So just the tools?
Yeah, just the capital request,
Okay.
yeah, for the tools. Does anyone else have any questions of the chief? Chief, thank you very much, again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
And feel free to reach out if, as you review this, if anybody has, any questions develop and so forth. And I will email Leanne tomorrow.
Great, thank you, Chief. Casey, do you have anything for us?
Not this evening, thank you.
Okay, how about the Board of Selectmen, anything like that? Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Before the meeting, I asked Catherine if she could, well, first of all, let me preface this by saying I think there will be a big difference between our operating budget and our default budget, largely because of capital outlay. And what I'm trying to do is, in the default budget, I would like to identify what items coming out of the budget are from the general fund and what items coming out of the budget are from the enterprise funds.
Okay.
Because if people question us on that, I think we should have an answer for them. For instance, the capital outlay, I believe, is coming down, is a little under $600,000, I believe, and the general fund taxation, out of that 600,000 or under 600,000, the general fund taxation is about 230,000. So in a default budget, I believe all of capital outlay comes out of the budget. And so what I would like to know and tell people is that out of that 570,000, only 230,000 is going to affect the tax rate.
Okay.
So, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand.
People will see a large difference between the two budgets, and I would like to narrow that gap by explaining, because electric rates won't go up, sewer rates generally don't go up, as well as the water rates. So I think it would be good to identify what's coming out of what, so we can justify the general fund's going up $1 million alone, right? So.
Yeah.
That's why I asked that.
Okay, thank you, Bob. You all set with that, Casey?
I am,
Yeah.
thank you.
Anyone else have anything else? Okay, guess if we get a motion to adjourn, thank you, John, and a
You gotta
second.
consider the minutes?
No, not tonight, no. We'll do it next time, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna do the consideration minutes,
November 29.
November
29.
29th. Yeah. Okay, get a motion to adjourn, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everyone.